My son raised his glass at the Mother's Day table, in front of the whole family, and asked me, beaming, "Mom, do you like the 5,000 Clara gives you?" Everyone laughed. I laughed too. I even thanked her again, the way I'd thanked her every month for 2 years. But driving home, one word wouldn't leave me alone. Gives. Like it was hers to give. I mortgaged my house in 2009 to hand my son his first $150,000. He promised me 15%, in writing, notarized by a man our family had trusted for 20 years. So that night, for the first time in months, I opened my banking app and actually read the memo line on that deposit. It didn't say, gift. It said, founder distribution. I decided to find out exactly what that meant, and what had happened to the 15% that was supposed to always be mine. My name is Eleanor Bishop. I spent 31 years keeping the books for a regional hardware distributor, the kind of job where you learn that a number never lies, but the label someone puts next to it sometimes does. I mention that because it matters later. Old habits from a career like that don't retire just because you do. I want to be honest about something before I go further. I liked Clara. I still do, in the complicated way you like someone once you've learned exactly how careful they are with paperwork, and exactly what that carefulness can be used for. Frank, my husband, was alive when Nathan came to us in 2009. The company he'd been working for had just laid off half its floor staff, including him, and he had an idea for software that tracked delivery routes better than anything the big carriers were using. He was 23 then, with nothing but a laptop, a half-finished business plan, and more confidence than sense. He needed $150,000 to build the first real version and keep the lights on. We didn't have that kind of money sitting anywhere. What we had was a house we'd paid down for 18 years. Frank was the one who insisted on doing it properly. "If we're doing this, we're doing it as owners, not as a loan," he told Nathan, sitting at our kitchen table with a legal pad between them. "Your mother and I are taking on real risk. We want a real stake." Nathan didn't argue. He seemed relieved to make it formal. He said it made him feel like he'd earned the money instead of just been given it. They wrote it out by hand that night, 15% ownership, permanent, in exchange for the second mortgage. Warren Hale, Frank's oldest friend from the Union Hall and by then a practicing attorney, notarized it for us the following week, right there in our own living room, joking that he hoped he'd get invited to the company Christmas party someday. Frank died 4 years later, before the company had grown into anything more than 6 employees above a dry cleaner's. He never got to see what it became. I've always been glad, in a strange way, that he got to see the beginning instead of what happened to the ending. I didn't think much about the 15% for years. Nathan sent me a distribution every quarter, sometimes small, sometimes larger as the company grew. I never once had to ask for it. It simply arrived, the way something you're owed arrives when the person who owes it to you is decent. I never needed the money to feel secure. Frank and I had planned carefully. I needed it to feel like I still mattered to what I'd helped build, like I was still, in some small official way, a founder, and not just somebody's mother who used to have a house. I never once asked to sit on a board or attend a shareholder meeting. I never wanted to run anything. I only ever wanted the arrangement Frank had insisted on to remain exactly what it was, real, on paper, mine. Clara joined the company a decade later, first as outside counsel on contract, then brought in-house within a year. She was good at her job in a way I respected without reservation, thorough, unsentimental, the kind of lawyer who reads every document twice before she signs it. I used to admire that about her. She married Nathan 2 years after she joined. I didn't yet understand that the same carefulness could be turned toward quietly tidying away an arrangement nobody had asked her to tidy. The first crack came at that Mother's Day table, when Nathan lifted his glass and said the thing about the $5,000 Clara gives me, with such simple, unguarded pride, like he was handing me a compliment. It wasn't until I was alone in my car, halfway home, that the word landed. Gives. Not returns. Not owes. Gives. My son believed, sincerely, that his wife was being generous to his mother out of the goodness of her own pocket. 2 years of monthly deposits, and somewhere along the way, without me noticing the exact moment it happened, I had stopped being a founder in his mind and become someone being taken care of. That night, I opened my banking app and actually read the deposit. The memo line read, Founder Distribution, Q3. Not a personal transfer from Clara. A distribution from the company's own account. If it was a founder distribution, it was coming from the company, not from Clara's pocket, the way Nathan's toast had made it sound. I decided not to call Nathan yet. I have never liked confronting people with a feeling when I could confront them with a fact instead. Feelings get argued with. Facts, mostly, don't. The following Saturday, I drove out to the storage unit that still held the boxes from the old house. It took me almost 2 hours of sifting before I found the folder, tucked behind a stack of Nathan's grade school report cards, of all things. Inside, the original agreement. One handwritten page, a little yellowed at the folds. Nathan's signature at the bottom. Frank's beside it. Mine beside that. And below all three, Warren's notary stamp and signature, dated November of 2009. 15% ownership, permanent, in exchange for the $150,000 second mortgage. I sat in my car in the storage facility parking lot for a long time that afternoon, remembering how certain Frank had been that this was the safest money we'll ever lend. If this agreement still existed, and had never been revoked, then somewhere between that kitchen table in 2009 and the toast at my Mother's Day dinner, my 15% had gone somewhere. I intended to find out where. I photographed both pages before I even left the parking lot. Some old bookkeeper's instinct, never let the only copy of something important sit in a single box again. That evening, I called my neighbor Marjorie. I told her about the toast, the memo line, the agreement in the storage unit. Marjorie was quiet for a moment. Then she asked me a question that reshaped the entire rest of my investigation. Eleanor, have you ever actually seen the company's paperwork? Not what Nathan tells you. The actual filings. I hadn't. Not once, in 15 years. The next week, I exercised something I'd genuinely forgotten I had the standing to do. Because I was named on the company's early ownership filings, I was legally entitled to request a copy of certain corporate records directly. I wrote a short, polite letter to the company's registered agent. 10 days later, a thick envelope arrived at my door. Buried in the middle of it was a document called a Founder Equity Cleanup Amendment, filed the same year Nathan and Clara married. It reclassified all informal or undocumented family contributions to the company's early capitalization as discretionary distributions made at the company's sole discretion. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere in the document. But the description fit exactly one arrangement in the company's history. Mine. At the bottom, a signature line. My name, signed above it. I stared at it for a long time. It looked like my handwriting. It also, the longer I looked, didn't. The loop on the E was too tight. I've made the same loop since I was 12. You don't change it at 60. I called Warren Hale that afternoon. He was 82 now, living in a retirement community 3 hours away in Santa Rosa. He'd stopped notarizing anything 6 years ago when his eyesight began to fail. Warren, I asked him, when Nathan and Clara were cleaning up old paperwork, did anyone ask you to notarize anything related to my 15%? Long pause on the line. Ellie, he said slowly, the same nickname Frank had used for me, the one they both started saying in 1978, I haven't notarized anything for that company since 2009. And if my name is on a document that says I did, I'd like to know who put it there. Warren and I agreed to meet at his retirement community the following Saturday. I drove 3 hours each way. It was worth every mile. He examined the amendment under a magnifying lamp he kept for his model ship hobby. 3 minutes of silence. Then he set it down, took off his glasses, and looked at me with an expression I've only ever seen on a small handful of faces, the face of someone who has just realized they've been implicated in something they didn't do. "That's not my stamp," he said. "It's close. Good enough that an electronic filing clerk wouldn't question it. But the embossment pressure is wrong. I bought my stamp from a supply house in Sacramento in '87. They shaped their dies with a 2-degree bevel. This one's flat." He paused. "And the date on the certificate? November 14th, 2018. I was in the hospital that day. Gallbladder. There's going to be a record of that." Warren offered to write an affidavit. He said he'd been a notary for almost 40 years and he wasn't going to let his name be used to cheat his oldest friend's widow out of her share of anything. I had the handwriting examined by a professional forensic document examiner in San Francisco the following week. She confirmed what my gut had been telling me since the storage unit: my signature on the amendment was a forgery. Good enough to pass a casual glance, photoreferenced from my signature on a holiday card or a check, she guessed, but under magnification, the pen pressure was completely inconsistent with someone who had been signing their own name for 60 years. I had the original agreement. I had Warren's affidavit affirming the notary stamp was fraudulent. I had a forensic report proving the signature wasn't mine. I called Nathan and told him I needed to discuss something important about the company's founding documents. I asked him to have Clara present. The following Wednesday, I walked into their conference room with a leather folio containing 200 pages of documentation. I'd organized everything the way I used to organize the monthly close binders at the hardware distributor: chronological, cross-referenced, impossible to argue with. Nathan looked confused. Clara looked curious. I've spent a long time turning over what Clara looked like in that moment. I think she knew something was coming, but I don't think she knew I'd gotten as far as I had. I laid the original agreement on the table first. Then the amendment. Then Warren's affidavit. Then the handwriting forensics report. Then I read them a passage from the Delaware Corporate Code, Section 228, about shareholder consent and the requirements for amending ownership structures. "You're telling me my signature was forged," Nathan said quietly, staring at the handwriting analysis. He wasn't looking at Clara. He was looking at me, the way a child looks at you when they realize the world is more dangerous than they'd been told. "I'm telling you this signature, on this document, is not mine," I said. "I'm not a forensic analyst. I can only tell you what the expert concluded." Clara said nothing for nearly a full minute, the longest I've ever seen her go without speaking. Then, this could have been a clerical error, Eleanor. An overzealous paralegal. A filing mistake. A filing mistake that reclassified my 15% as discretionary distributions, I said. "For 2 years. While you were the company's only in-house counsel." Another silence. Deeper this time. "I don't need a lawsuit," I said. "I need my 15% restored, in writing, by end of week. And I need a letter, signed by both of you, acknowledging that the amendment was filed without my consent and has been formally rescinded." I stood, picked up my folio, and left before anyone could say no. 3 days later, the documents arrived by courier. Nathan's signature. Clara's signature. A new filing with the state. My 15% is back. On paper, at least. But here's the part one can't fix. When I offered my hand to Nathan before I left the conference room, he hesitated. A full beat. His own mother. And that hesitation, that tiny, private fracture, is worth more than 15% of any company I've ever seen. Being reliable had felt like a virtue my whole life. But that day, it felt like a vulnerability someone had mapped out and used against me on purpose. Now, every month, when the distribution hits my account, I open the memo line first, before the balance. It still says, Founder Distribution. Inside, where a mother used to be, it now says, Eleanor Bishop, 15%. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Family stories like this are never comfortable to tell, but someone needs to put them into words. If this story meant something to you, please give this video a like, and share it with someone who would understand. Subscribe to follow more stories from the family table, the ones we usually don't say out loud. Next week, a mother learns her son has sold an asset she thought belonged to both of them, while she was recovering from a surgery she never expected to survive. See you then.